Hello everyone, this is B. Prabakaran, Assistant Professor, Department of English from St.Joseph College of Arts and Science, Autonomous, Cuddalore. In this video, I'm going to present the main ideologies and practitioners of confessional poetry. This school of poetry and practitioners were originated during the 20th century, particularly 1950s and then 1960s. And the very word confession means itself a submission or an acceptance of one's guilt or fault. And the writers of literature take two different perspectives in writing poetry. One it is the personal poetry and one it is impersonal poetry. And this confessional school of poets comes under the category of personal writings. And it's a type of poetry that focuses on personal experiences and emotion. We have already stated that confessional poems are much personal, and the writers they try to bring what kind of sufferings, what kind of trauma, or what kind of suppression or subjugation they experienced in their personal life, and in what way it affected them, or in what way it has get a connection to the society where they lived. This is the main aspect of confessional poetry, and it doesn't mean that only in the 20th century there is something called confessional poems. It was already there. When it comes to the age of romanticism, the writers like John Keats, and then the prose writer Thomas De Quincey, who wrote The Confessions of an English OP meter. All these are ample examples to understand what is the basic theme of confession poetry. So, as we already stated, it emerged during the 1950s and 1960s in United States. It is a reaction against the impersonal nature of modernist poetry. Modernists are much known for writing impersonal poem. We have imagism, symbolism, all these kind of poems insisted on a very objective approach, and this poetry is literally opposite to it, because it tries to bring the personal experiences of the writer, and then it speaks about any traumatical experience, or it speaks about the suicidal thoughts of the writers and the fear of society. All those things can be seen in their theme of the confessional poems. It's a personal trauma. The poets often share their struggles with depression, suicide, addiction, and furthermore. And then also they speak the reasons um, for the breakups in the family relationship, and then what kind of depression they are undergoing, the economical problem, and then in what way one's role affects the society and family, and then this the stereotyping of the gender roles, and in what way the stereotypical things made a strong subjugation on the genders. All those things have been expressed in this kind of writing. And the very term, that is confession, it was first used logically to this um, school of poets was made by M.L. Rosenthal, who published Poetry as a Confession, and this is a study about Robert Lowell's life studies. Robert Lowell is one of the important practitioners of this uh, school, and Robert Lowell published a very famous book called The Life Studies, where he explored the problem and the trauma that was created by the World War, the cruelty of the World War. what kind of impression that left to him and to the society. Those things were discussed in this collection, and that was taken for an analysis and interpretation by M.L. Rosenthal, and where it the usage of the word confession to a set of writers, that is particularly the practitioners, right? Sylvia Plath, Annie Sexton, and W.D. Snodgrass. Snodgrass is known to be the father of this confessional school of poets. And the famous works of W.D. Snodgrass is Heart's Needle, and Annie Sexton is known for writing the gender stereotypical things. And then when it comes to the techniques or the aspects of writing confessional poems, it's much personal, as we have already stated. Then only the readers can easily understand what kind of the sufferings they have undergone. Sylvia Plath committed suicide. She literally put her head into a oven. What kind of pressure she has experienced, we as a readers need to understand. If that can be understand in a very clear cut way, if it has been given in the context of personal sufferings. And then the writer of 20th century, that is Virginia Woolf, the much celebrated writer, she suffered from bipolar disorder, and on fine days she committed suicide. She made so many of the attempts, and the suicide letters she wrote that created an impact. Even if we read now, we literally shed tears for the suffering she had. She portrayed about the good old days she experienced with her husband Leonard Woolf. But when a disease came, like bipolar disorder, when a kind of pressure as an individual they're experiencing, when there is a moment that you cannot escape from it, that will put you in a kind of pressurized situation. All those things have clearly understood, and that was expressed in their writings. And the images and symbols these writers used create a strong emotional connect with the readers also. And they used very personal landscapes, the topographical images, the topographical information they gave needs a writer to find out where they lived, and in what kind of situation they lived, and what kind of environment they have seen at that time. All those things are clearly reflected. And one thing an individual should always have in mind is, if he or she needs to understand what is a confessional poem, it is definitely necessary to know the personal background of those kind of writers. Without knowing their personal sufferings, without knowing their personal information, their biographical things, the controversial things they faced, without that you cannot understand entirely a confessional poem. It's an openness, it's openly accepting their guilt, it is openly accepting what they have been undergoing. And if that has to be clearly grasped by us, definitely we have to understand their personal sufferings, their personal information, so that it is easy to understand the confessional poem entire. And then this confessional poetry will have a very rawness. It will never hide of anything. It is much autobiographical. Therefore, we need to accept what kind of things they they tried to express through their poetry. And then when it comes to the writing technique, most of the poems will be written in free verse, because it's an overflow of someone's personal feelings. It is not a kind of a restriction or kind of putting the things in an order. Not at all so. It is much relatable to the point of how an individual experiences of pain. So, in that sense, we cannot express or we cannot expect a writer to be much logical to write an iambic pentameter. There is a basic difference between iambic pentameter and blank verse. Blank verse means it is writing in an unrhymed iambic pentameter, whereas free verse it never follows any kind of regulations. It is much free. It cut crosses the rules. Therefore, it brings out the emotions very clearly to the readers, and that makes the readers to understand the basic theme of that poem. And most of the times they don't use very bombastic words. It will be very much direct, and it will give you a kind of impact that what kind of individual fear they have experienced, what kind of public fear that was happened at the time. When World War One and Two happened, so many people got a shock. At any time, anything may happen. The multiplication of nuclear weapon has created a fear. All these things have been expressed in this genre, and with this, we come to an end for the Confessional School of Poetry, and thank you.